right, Thrive Nation. On today's show, you are in for a treat. On today's show, we're interviewing the former top advisor for President Reagan, a former top political advisor for President Donald J. Trump, a former top political advisor for President George W. Bush. We're interviewing Roger Stone. Yes, that Roger Stone. We are interviewing Roger Stone right here on today's edition of the Thrive Time Show, and he's sharing with you and I the importance of not letting the Democrats steal the 2020 presidential election.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrive Time Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here.
Yes, and yes. Thrive Nation, it is a very special occasion because on today's show, we are interviewing the man, the myth, and the legend who has been a top advisor and a consultant for President Richard Nixon, President Ronald Reagan, for Jack Kemp, for President George W. Bush, for President Donald J. Trump, and he recently was asked to not go to prison by the great President Donald J. Trump. Roger Stone, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you, sir?
Clay, I'm really delighted to be with you. For those who don't know, we met last weekend in the closing days of the 2020 election, had a great time there in Nashville with many, many, many patriots. And now we are both watching the slow motion theft of the presidency of the United States. Ironically, and Clay can vouch for this, I predicted all of this last week.
Yes, you did.
Long print pieces. I'm a veteran of 10 national presidential campaigns. They're all Republicans, except for I supported Gary Johnson, the Libertarian, when the Republicans unadvisedly nominated Mitt Romney for president. That was a bridge too far for me. And I've never really quite seen anything like this, Clay. This is the most extraordinary thing I have seen. In other words, we have always had ballot fraud and corruption on the fringes of American politics. It's always been prevalent in those jurisdictions where one party has total control. Those tend to be urban areas headed by Democrats.
Yes.
Name the last great Republican machine. I don't think you can do that. But the level of cheating here, starting with the effort in numerous states to change the laws to set the table for cheating. So, for example, in Pennsylvania, a Democratic legislature, a Democratic governor decide that you can turn in votes as long as 9 days after the election, as long as you claim that they were executed on election day.
Correct.
But how do we know that they really were? So in other words, the Democrats can look at the results in Pennsylvania, figure out how many votes short they are, and then go essentially manufacture those votes, fabricate those votes. We're seeing this repeating itself in numerous states. The ballot showing up in dumpsters, showing up in the strangest places, anecdotal testimony from people who just tell me the most horrific stories. It's very important that all this stuff be collected, that it be chronicled very carefully, because it is going to be the subject of an appeal or an effort to avert a stolen presidency, an effort to void the decision by the mainstream media that they say they declare who the winner is. Legally, as you know, the secretaries of state or the other appropriate state functionaries assert who the winner is when they certify their actual results, not the New York Times.
You know, what I want to do is I want to tee up an idea, and then I want to give the listeners a lot of action. I want to put the listeners into activation mode, into action mode. So the idea I want to tee up is you were a bunch of military, or not military, but a bunch of armed agents stormed your home and tried to put you into prison. They tried to take you away to prison. And when you found yourself, what time in the morning did everybody show up to arrest you?
It was 6 a.m. Thanks to CNN, I guess every person in America pretty much knows this story. But I have a long association with Donald Trump. I have known him for 40 years. We became friends when I was running Governor Ronald Reagan's campaign for president in New York. I subsequently went to work for him. I first had the idea of his running for president in 1988, although former President Richard Nixon, who I also worked for, actually thought of it before I did, and expressed that to Donald, by the way. I wanted him to run again in 1988. I wanted him to run again in 2016. 2012, when we nominated that hapless boob, Mitt Romney. I was really obviously delighted when he decided to make America great again in 2016. And because of my longtime relationship with the president, I was targeted by Robert Mueller's bully squad, an investigation we now know was completely illegitimate. That started with fabricated information.
At 6 a.m., how many vehicles, how many armed people, how many people showed up to arrest
Let
him?
me set the stage. For 2 years, the Mueller operation leaked illegally to the mainstream media, and they predicted over and over again, Roger Stone will be indicted for treason, espionage, conspiracy against the United States, tax evasion, money laundering of millions of dollars into rubles or rubles into dollars, I forget which it was, mail fraud, wire fraud, aiding and abetting a conspiracy, unauthorized access to a protected computer, receipt and dissemination of stolen information. It really sounds horrific, doesn't it?
Yep.
The problem, of course, is that none of those things were true. Rather than just contact my lawyer, which is the way white-collar crimes are usually handled, even when they're bogus, they initiated a raid on my home at 6 a.m. on January 25th, 2019. 17 armored vehicles arrived with 29 heavily armed, fully SWAT-geared FBI agents. There was a helicopter overhead. I know from the security video that I've now seen that 2 amphibious FBI boats pulled up to the dock behind my house, and frogmen jumped out, also heavily armed, everybody carrying assault weapons. They had a bunch of these vicious canines on leashes. That was the scariest part, frankly. And then they brought a giant battering ram up to the front door of my house, as if I was not going to respond. They pounded on the door. I opened the door. I was wearing my iconic Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong t-shirt. If you want one of those, by the way, you can go to stonecoldtruth.com in the store, or you can go to fightback.store. Hold on to yours, though, because someday it will be quite valuable, and the Smithsonian will probably try to buy it from you. In any event, they said, "Are you Roger Stone?" I said, "I am." They said, "We have a warrant for your arrest and a warrant to search these premises. Please step outside and put your hands behind your back." I was handcuffed and frog marched out for the CNN cameras, who had arrived exactly 14 minutes before the FBI, which, as you know, Clay, was a total coincidence. I mean, they just happened to be there.
They just happened to be there. Oh.
Yeah. The problem with that, of course, is that a CNN producer actually emailed at 7 a.m. a copy of a draft of my indictment.
Oops.
But the actual draft itself was not unsealed by a federal magistrate until 9:30 in the morning.
Oops.
Possession and receipt of that document, which was a sealed document, is a crime in itself. Telling somebody in advance about the exercise of a search warrant is specifically a felony. So somebody at CNN has a lot of explaining to do, somebody in the special counsel's office, somebody in the FBI. Unfortunately, we have no answers. Senator Lindsey Graham, grandstanding on TV, said he would get to the bottom of who ordered the raid on my home. Of course, he's done nothing. He talks a great game, but just doesn't actually do anything.
Okay, so what we're going to do, I want to make sure listeners get. I'm just making sure listeners get this idea. What's happening is the radical left. These people will do anything to win elections, to silence people they don't agree with. They will do anything. And what I have found, unfortunately, is a lot of conservative people who I love and respect as people, they're not willing to do anything because they don't want to upset anybody. They don't want to offend anybody. And so now what we have is 100,000 plus ballots that come in at 3 a.m. in the great state of Michigan that happen to be 100% Joe Biden ballots, Joe Biden votes. You just happen to have. Now, Roger, these aren't even smart people who are trying to steal the election. You would think they would at least say, if we're going to send in over 100,000 ballots after the close of the polls on behalf of, some of, if we're going to try to steal the election, you'd think they'd have at least some of them would be President Trump and some would be Biden. But these are all 100% Biden ballots that are coming in. And this election is they're attempting to steal the election. We've got over 700,000 ballots in Pennsylvania just showing up, and they all happen to be Joe Biden. Regardless of the number of ballots, they're trying to steal the election. And we have a president who thankfully cared enough about you to commute your sentence. Thank the Lord. And so I'd like to ask you about what it felt like when you had the president of these United States demonstrate his loyalty to help commute your sentence, and then B, I want to know, what can our listeners do right now, Roger? What can they do to help support the president who helped support you?
Well, let me address your question. I was subjected to a Soviet-style show trial. I was not afforded the opportunity to make any defense because the judge unilaterally ruled out any specific defense that would have been effective. We now know that they also withheld extraordinarily important information from us that was contained in the Mueller report, an admission that was published at midnight by the DOJ on Election Day. That's unheard of. At midnight, the busiest news day of the year, in which they admitted in the Mueller report, previously redacted, they had no evidence whatsoever that I was involved in illegal activities regarding WikiLeaks or Julian Assange. That thing which they allegedly said I lied to Congress about. Let me understand this. How can you lie about something they have no evidence that I even knew? It's an absurdity. The president recognized that my trial was deeply flawed, that the Jerry Forewoman was in the tank, was an admitted member of the resistance. She had posted on attacking me by name and the president in 2019. She hid those posts on a private setting during jury selection and the trial. She deleted them after the trial. That's undeniable proof of bias to anyone who looks at it, other than the judge in my case, who refused to vacate my verdict and give me a new trial, as virtually every lawyer, right, left, and center, every prominent lawyer in the country, like Jonathan Turley, Alan Dershowitz, Andrew Napolitano, my great friend, all agreed it was complete evidence of bias. So the president, but I think the president was really spurred to action, Clay, when contrary to current law, contrary to all legal precedents, contrary to the current regulations of the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Prisons, without regard to my age or my health, and falsifying the safety conditions at the prison they wanted to send me to due to COVID-19, they were intent in sending me at 68 years old with asthma to a COVID-19 infested prison where no precautions, no masks, no hand washing, no segregation, no nothing is being done. This was essentially a murder rap. This was essentially the death penalty. And it put me and my family through some very difficult and wrenching times. The first thing they do when they target you like this is to destroy you financially. So you can't afford the lawyers to fight them. You can't even afford groceries. So I lost my home, my car, most of my insurance. I was unconstitutionally gagged so that I couldn't defend myself. I finally hit rock bottom. And then I took a piece of really sage advice from Reverend Franklin Graham, who I had the occasion to meet on the trail. And he reminded me of my belief in God. He reminded me of my Catholic upbringing. He told me it was time to cut the crap and get back with Jesus. And he assured me that if I confessed my sins and I got right with the Lord and pledged to try to walk in his way, he really believed the Lord would protect me. The Lord would provide the guidance to the president to do the right thing. So I did that. It's one of the greatest decisions I've ever made in my life, perhaps the greatest. It's up there with marrying my wife. So the president, literally after the courts, not only the lower court, but the circuit court in D.C. argued no, despite all the precedents and the law and the regulations, Stone must go to prison next Tuesday so we can kill him as quickly as we possibly can. The president, in an extraordinary act of mercy and justice, commuted my sentence. Thank you, Jesus. All of that prayer works. I can't even begin to tell you, Clay, literally the hundreds of thousands of Americans who told me by email, by text message, or when I went to the local gas station that they were praying for me. Prayer has real power. I'm a living example of it, which is why we need to be praying about this election. This is not an election between Republicans and Democrats. This is not your usual shuffle of the deck chairs in the Titanic
Correct.
that takes place in Washington. This is a fight between dark and light. This is a fight between good and evil.
True.
This is a fight between the godly and the godless. And hanging in the balance is all our American freedoms, our freedom of speech, our freedom to worship, our freedom of expression, our freedom of assembly, our freedom of thought. These things are all up for grabs. These are no longer indelible, unfortunately.
The Democrat run states, for the listeners out there that try to stay out of politics who don't live in Democrat states, I want to make sure we get this. In the Democrat states, they've so far defunded the police in Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon, and California, and you see looting and burning and riots. These people are in favor of late-term abortion. The Democrats, Joe Biden, in favor of late-term abortion, post-birth abortion, as you see in Virginia. It's really
infanticide, as we call it.
It's terrible, and they're saying you can't do praise and worship, and you can't have people over for Thanksgiving. We're not going to have Christmas. I mean, so what I want to do is I want to tee up this idea. And then, Roger, I'm going to give you the mic because we've got to activate our listeners right now. We got to activate. There's people that talk. And there's people that actually do stuff. In fact, you wrote this book called Stone's Rules, which we were going to talk about, and we'll talk about it on future shows. But we were going to talk about it, and one of your rules is you talk about there are people that talk, and there are people that do. In fact, rule number 1 says there are men of action and men of words. We're going to talk about that. But first, I want to get this idea out there, folks. Paul, who wrote so much of the Bible, okay? This guy was beaten 39 times on 5 separate occasions. He wrote 13 books of the Bible in prison. This man was shipwrecked 3 times. He was stoned. He was actually bitten by a snake, and yet he found time to write the Bible. So don't tell Roger you don't have time to take action right now. Don't tell me you're watching The Voice, you're too busy at the kids' soccer game, okay? It is my birthday. This is actually the day of my birth, November 5th. I'm here with Roger Stone. Why am I here? Why is Roger here? Why are we doing this? The hours are long. The pay is low. We're doing it because we love this country. And when Roger asks you to take action right now, I need you to get out a piece of paper, I need you to get out a pen, and I need you to commit to blocking out at least an hour of power to do what this man is asking you to do, because we really can make a difference and we can win this thing. Roger, what can we do?
Well, first, I think it's important before we get to the action steps to actually set the table. These riots that you've seen in a number of U.S. cities, these efforts to defund the police, this is all part of a insidious and concerted plan to steal this election. That's kind of like the hors d'oeuvre or the opening act. In other words, they want to show us that they can burn America down. Then we defund the police to make sure there's nobody there to stop them from burning America down. That way, when they audaciously and openly steal a presidential election through ballot fraud that could not be more obvious in Michigan and Wisconsin, in all of the, particularly those two, but also in Nevada, outrageous, in Arizona, equally outrageous, and many, many other places, that we will be pressured or cowed into folding. I've known Donald Trump for 40 years. Let me tell you something. He's a brawler. He's a fighter. He will never admit defeat when he has not been fairly defeated. He won this election in one of the most stunning comebacks I've ever seen. I mean, they really counted him out. I mean, look at these polls. All of them completely wrong. That he was going to lose Florida. Every poll told us he would lose Florida. He won Florida going away. Oh, he's going to lose Wisconsin by 17, but he didn't. He very narrowly lost Wisconsin, but I think on the basis of ballot fraud. So this is not going to be over quickly. So everybody is aware of what's going to happen. So there's no shock to the system. The networks will shortly declare Joe Biden the winner. The problem is that they don't have the legal authority to do that. They're only giving you their opinion of things. They're entitled to do that, but you should not believe what they say as gospel, because it's not. Secondarily, there will be a huge effort to say that it is Trump who is acting illegally. By asserting his rights to have a fair election and to examine the anomalies in all these states, including the swing states, they're going to try to claim that he's doing something illicit. He's not. He's merely protecting his rights and the rights of the American people.
Yes.
I do recommend that people get on an app that's called Who's Near, WHOSNEAR. It's trademarked, Who's Near, for Trump supporters. No, it's free, 100% free. No, I do not have an interest in it. This is an incredible organizational tool that only allows us to find each other. People who are like-minded patriots who sign up can find each other on a geographic basis. We're going to use this for organizing public protests in favor of a fair election conducted with integrity. We are not the violent ones. That's BLM and Antifa. We believe that in our society, when you have a dispute, it gets heard in the courts. But the citizens have an absolute right to express their opinion and let those in decision-making places understand that opinion. So, peaceful protest, yes. Civil disobedience, the kind that Dr. King practiced, that's up to the individual. There are legal consequences, but non-violent.
Roger, what's that app again? What's that app one more time?
It's Who's Near. There's no apostrophe. WHOSNEAR. For Trump supporters.
Okay.
Who's Near? You'll find it on the App Store. You'll find it on the Apple App Store until they see this recording, or this program, then they probably won't see it
real quick,
anymore.
make sure we get this. So Who's Near is the app. It's WHOS. WHOSNEAR. Who's Near. And then Andrew, I'm going to have you right now while Roger's speaking. If all the listeners too, Donald Trump just posted this. It's DJT45.co/stop fraud. It's being taken down off of Twitter right now, but it's still up there. DJT45.co/stop fraud. I sent you all the incidents of fraud. If everybody out there could report voter fraud if you know about it, because we're trying to collect evidence of fraud from coast to coast. And this is powerful that we all take this action step. So download the Who's Near app in the App Store. Continue there, Roger.
Now, in 2016, there was a willful effort to deprive Donald Trump of the Republican nomination after he had already accumulated sufficient number of delegates to do so. The Republican National Convention is governed by its own rules, not state or federal law, and the forces of the country club establishment Republicans gathered together. We're talking about John Kasich, the Bushes, their running dog lackey, Ted Cruz, who poses as a conservative, and they were trying to block Donald Trump's nomination. So we formed an organization called Stop the Steal. Stop the Steal was built to assert the rules of the Republican National Convention and make sure that the will of the people was reflected in how the delegates that they had selected voted at the National Convention. Some states does not bind those delegates. So even though Donald Trump swept Louisiana, for example, more than half of the delegates appointed by the state chairman were never Trumpers and were prepared to vote against the president, not only on his nomination question, but on rules and procedures and seating credentials for the convention. Then Stop the Steal rolled into a project in which we sought to conduct exit polls outside key selected precincts where fraud was suspected, to try to see if the electronic voting machines, which are really just a primitive computer, were being manipulated and we weren't getting true totals by comparing them to exit polling. President Trump and I, Donald Trump then, were sued by the Democratic National Committee and 35 Democratic state committees in federal court and in 35 state courts, claiming that we are intimidating and harassing voters in an effort to suppress the vote. We prevailed in both state and federal court, including the U.S. Supreme Court, when the courts ruled that you couldn't suppress a vote by talking to a voter and interacting with them only after they had already cast their ballot. More fake news by the Democrats in an effort to stop us from ensuring the integrity of the election. I'm now talking to a substantial number of former law enforcement officials, former judicial officials, former military officials,
yes,
about reconstituting Stop the Steal to do a number of legal, completely legal, non-violent things to make sure that there's a full examination of what's going on in terms of voter fraud and to seek an equitable outcome. In other words, we need to count every legal vote. That's the argument, folks. It's not stop the count. It's count every legal vote. If there's a vote outstanding that hasn't yet been counted, let's examine it. But if it's an illegal vote, if we can prove that it's not a valid vote, then it should not be counted. There's a lot of nuance there. You see, the media, the fake news media, like, CNN,
Yep.
MSNBC, they're trying to say, well, Joe Biden says count every vote. Donald stop count. He against universal suffrage. He doesn't want your vote to count. No, what we're saying is count every legal vote. So on social media, whether you are still on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or wherever you are, I, by the way, have been banned for life in all of those places because I'm so dangerous, because I speak the truth about vaccinations, among other things.
Yep.
For those of you who are not banned, you see, they can ban me, they can ultimately ban Clay, but they cannot ban all of us. And therefore, you should hashtag on all your communications, hashtag stop the steal, STAL. This is going to be a rallying cry, a battle cry in the days ahead. I am in touch with many who are on the ground in these swing states. I have good sources of political intelligence about what is really going on. Arizona has clearly been called for Joe Biden prematurely. I believe when all the legal votes are counted in Arizona, Donald Trump will be the winner. I was confident about Pennsylvania yesterday. I now see how deep and egregious and hidden the extraordinary fraud is in the city of Philadelphia. Pennsylvania's results may have to be challenged in the courts, in the state courts or the federal courts, and so on. It's also very important to remember who is the final arbiter here, who really gets to decide. Well, if you go through the system, what you're going to find is that the electors to the Electoral College, that's who actually elects our president, are certified by the state legislatures. They have the final say. A state legislature can look at election results, look at the fraud, and say, no, this result is fraudulent, and can send electors that are not pledged to someone who stole the election in that state. In this case, Joe Biden. So there's many twists and turns. For Americans who hope that this will all be settled tomorrow, that's not going to happen. The deep state really, with their internet censorship, really hurt the president and his campaign very badly. That's also a precursor for the current battle. You see, they don't want us to tell the truth about election fraud. When they censor the president himself for saying something that they argue is not correct, who set them up to decide what's right and what's wrong? Who set them up to play God? It is very sad that the Trump Justice Department has never taken antitrust action against these social media giants, Facebook, Twitter, and so on, because what they're doing is illegal. It's also bad for our democracy because democracy dies in darkness.
Roger,
I read it on the masthead of the Washington Post. They say it, they just don't practice it.
Roger, I want to ask you this. My final question I have for you here. Because a lot of our listeners aren't aware of what happens in these situations because this situation has never really happened. Do you see a scenario where this election is decided in the Supreme Court?
That's one conceivable result. Now, how it would get to the Supreme Court is a legitimate legal question. I guess the Trump campaign could argue that there are due process issues, federal due process issues here. That could be a formidable argument for the court taking it up. But it could also be settled by the state legislatures.
Got it.
If all of the corruption is exposed, it would be the duty of a state legislature to say, no, we shouldn't send electors pledged to reflect the result of a stolen election. By the way, the legislative branch of government is not higher than the judicial branch in our system. They're co-equal, and they each have their own responsibilities. A state court cannot order the entire body of a state legislature to do something. They cannot do so. So I think that's also a real possibility. The answer in politics, of course, is when people say to me constantly, and they do, what's going to happen? Well, I'm not a fortune teller. I'm not a seer. I have a lot of experience, but I've never seen anything quite like this.
Yeah. The
act of censorship by the mainstream media in covering none of the very real and epic corruption of Hunter Biden that appears to involve his father and his uncle. The fact that the New York Times and NBC continue to say, oh, there are serious questions about the authenticity of the Hunter Biden emails. No, folks, no, there is not. That's a lie. NBC, by the way, completely controlled by the Central Intelligence Agency. Ken Delannon, who's their chief political reporter, was fired at the Chicago Tribune for clearing his stories with the agency in Langley. He is an operative for the CIA. He's not a journalist. He's an operative posing as a journalist. Let me put it another way. Anything that comes out of his mouth is 90% likely that is false and disinformation. Part of this psyop that we've seen. What have they told us for weeks and weeks? It's over. Trump lost. Go fishing. You don't have to worry about this. It's done. Between the COVID-19 fallout and the exodus of suburban women from the Trump coalition, Trump is done. He's finished. He's lost. Here's a poll that proves it. Here's another poll that proves it. We're not going to cover the fact that 50,000 people showed up at his rally. So this is a psychological drama in which they're trying to create groupthink. The president disproved this with the most audacious, interesting, positive, upbeat, but extraordinary drive for re-election. This guy came back from the precipice by being interesting and entertaining, but the energy involved, the pure physical stamina and the Herculean physical effort is something to marvel. He did the same thing 4 years ago. He's now done it again. They have a candidate who is almost comatose. They take him out every once in a while to show people he's still alive, but he really can't string together more than a few sentences before he makes a mistake.
Roger.
And those mistakes are costly.
Roger, the people out there, they're going to get the Who's Near app. They're going to get the Who's Near app. We're going to do that. They're going to report any fraud that they've seen, whether firsthand, social media, whatever, to djt45.co/stop fraud. Again, it's djt45.co/stop fraud. What else can they do? What else should our listeners be doing, Roger?
Well, you're familiar with this, Clay. This is a Roger Stone. This is an actual stone, which we did an enormous amount of scientific and historical research. This is an exact replica of the very stone that little David used to take down Goliath. And I have signed it. That is my name. And it's not signed by a machine or an intern. That's really my signature. It's a paperweight. It's a good luck charm. It's a keepsake. It will someday be of great value or not. But you can get yours at stonecoldtruth.com in the store, stonecoldtruth.com. The Stone family has to eat also, and it is my privilege to make these available. There's a deluxe version. This is the official original version. And I think I told you this, Clay. I didn't sell any of these when I first thought of it. It was kind of a joke, to tell you the truth. It's a Roger Stone. Get it?
I'm buying mine right now. I'm buying one right now. I'm telling you that.
Until Rolling Stone and the New York Magazine and several other elitist left-wing fake news publications mocked me openly for selling these. Then I sold thousands of them. It actually funded our Christmas last year when we were virtually destitute.
They're $15 a piece, right? $15 a piece.
That is correct.
And you're a guy who's been a top advisor to President Reagan, President Bush, President Trump. I mean, you've done so much to serve our country. You've lost so much to serve our country. And I think everybody out there, if you can buy a Roger Stone, I'm buying one. I am buying one right now, Roger. You're going to see a little payment come across the line here in a few minutes. Brother, thank you for being here, and I anticipate having you on the show a few more times leading into this determining who actually won the election. I mean, we're not going to allow this vote to be stolen, and our half million listeners are loyal. They're faithful to the Constitution and to freedom. So we'll have you on the show again, but thank you for your time, brother. I really do appreciate you.
Clay, it's great to be here with you. And again, I invite folks to go to stonecoldtruth.com. My books are available there, T-shirts, other things, but also key articles about this election. If you want to stay up to date on what's happening, go to stonecoldtruth.com. Clay, thank you and God bless you.
Take care, brother. Bye. And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom!
If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. So just as I say, we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around. We aren't going to let any injunction turn us around.
Gotta pick a side, man, it's do or die. Trying to stay up in the middle, man, that's suicide. Be hot or be cold, what's it gonna be? That's all I wanna see. If you ain't saying nothing, then you saying something. What you see is what you get, man. I ain't never frontin'. I see your problem, I'm lazy, cause I ain't never running. Opposition passing it off, cause they ain't never won it. Come on, time to say goodbye, it is you and I.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Time to pick a side, homie, do or die.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die. No mess, no vex for me. Both middle fingers up for Dr. G. I'm never gonna listen to his latest pitch or the scarf queen. Cause Dr. Brooks is up. I'm an American with the First Amendment and the Second Amendment to defend it. You want our guns? Well, come and take it. I hope you're good at dodging bullets and you're praying. The year 2020, the year of perfect vision. The time when you and I have to make a decision. Open up your minds like Hunter's laptop. But when you see corruption this time, it's gotta stop. Back the police, say no to the beast. No to the mask, take no vaccines. Back the police, say no to the beast. No to the mask, take no vaccines.
Time to say goodbye, it is you and I.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Time to pick a side, homie, do or die.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
If you compromise, it'll multiply. Treat you like a doormat, treat you speak your mind. Ain't hard to find, you must be blind if you can't see the sign. I got a spine, I won't never let them take what's mine. Time to unify, I'm talking you and I. If you ain't riding for the cause, better move aside. Sit back, watch me work, I'ma do it right. Time for you to pick a side, it's looking like a do or die. Time to say goodbye, it is you and I.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Time to pick a side, homie, do or die.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Our country will never be a socialist country. We're not going to let it happen.
And that is another lyrical miracle on the Thrive Time Show.